soaring, flying gliders is referred to in different ways. It's motorless flight, it's soaring, it's gliding. You tend to soar when you can stay up. You tend to glide when there's no lift and you come down. You get up with an airplane or with a winch. There's various ways to get up. And so I thought that rather than just talk about our club, which I'll touch on at the end, that we might be interested in hearing how you stay in the air. And I'll let you know that I'm going to say some things in this presentation that at the end, I'm going to see who knows the answers to them, okay? So I got a couple certificates up here for free glider rides. We're a club. We're a club, all right? We're not a commercial operation. The function of our club is to service our members. But we do offer demonstration flights. We have kind of a commercial feel when you're there. But these certificates will be available, and I'll have a couple questions so you can answer them, okay? So let me give you a little background first. My father was an airplane dealer. He sold Beechcraft airplanes. My formal training, although I flew all my life because of him, I mean, my earliest recollection is we always flew in small airplanes as a family. But at 12, I started taking lessons with an instructor. I soloed in gliders at age 14 and began towing gliders around age 21. I flew for corporations in Memphis flying turboprops for 6 years, and then I got on with the airlines with a little airline called Republic, which many of us may remember, and which merged with Northwest and then Delta. And I purchased my first glider in 2010. My wife always said that I talked about buying a glider, and when our youngest went to college, a glider in the club came up for sale, and she goes, "That you need to do." So I bought that glider, and what owning a glider allows you to do is take it places. And you'll see a trailer in the slides here that we carry them in, and when you can go places, you can experience all kinds of flying, and that is what lit my passion, or relit it, if you will, for flying. I mean, I almost took it for granted, I would say, that it was just something we did as a family. I didn't know any different. It'd be like the son of a car dealership always having a car to drive, for example. You just do it, and you don't think about it. But when I bought my own glider and started going places that I'd been hearing about, it just completely changed my passion for flying. That's my glider. I actually sent it back to Poland last year and had it refinished. I'm going to keep this till I quit flying. I figured I might as well, spruce it up a little bit. It was made in Poland. It's got a 50-foot wingspan, and it's got performance numbers that are called to as a glide ratio. A glide ratio is how many miles you can glide for every mile that you're up. This one is rated at 44 to 1. So if I'm a mile above the ground, about 5,000 something feet, in zero lift or sink conditions, this thing will glide for about 40 something miles. It speaks of the aerodynamic aspects of soaring. Is that drag is bad, lift is good, and so they aerodynamically design these things to do some amazing flying. This is the cockpit. It's got a GPS screen that's got performance numbers that you can reference. It tells you how far you are. That 16,119 number says that I'm close to, I was in North Carolina, but it can tell you if you're high or low to go to a particular point. So I can put in this case, this airport that I took off from, and it tells me that I've got an excess 16,000 feet to get there. So as you fly around, you try to stay aware of where you are. But here's the trailer I referred to. I had landed out in a field on the other side of Crowley's Ridge from our place that day, and a friend of mine brought my car and trailer over to pick me up, and we had just put the glider in the trailer. The trailer is about 32 feet long, I guess. So it's kind of an interesting dichotomy to trailer it around the country. But the sport of soaring, you've got local flying, you've got cross country, which by definition is when you try to get away from the airport and get back. And then you've got contests. The clubs can have contests. They're regional, national, and international contests. And then there's what's known as an online contest, which that GPS unit will record your flight, and the statistics of that flight can be created into a number, and you upload it to an international website, and the guy with the highest score every day is at the top of the list, and they rank everybody. And you can look on there, and you can look at their flights. Oh, and they also record flying. I'll get to the what I was just talking about, but they have record flying. I have earned one that is called the Diamond, which there's 3 components to most of these awards. There's a time component, a distance component, and an altitude component. The Diamond is a flight that's at least 5 hours in length, a 300-mile flight, and an altitude gain of 16,000 feet. So I've done that, and I'm the 1,051st person in the world to have done that. Not that everybody, there are not a lot of people that might have done any individual component of that, but to be able to do all 3 of them and to have it properly certified is really the point. That doesn't make me the best glider pilot in the world, but it means that I went after that goal and got it. Which coincidentally, I took our 2-place glider over in the Chattanooga area last year, and a buddy and I notched a state record for 2-seat glider flying. So there's records you can play with and things like that. But the sport has its own lingo, as a lot of sports have. One is knots. Now, knots is also a speed through the air, but we referred to, if I was in 5 knots of lift, that meant the vertical speed was going up 5 knots. My glider in calm air is going to sink at about 1.5 knots. So the net effect was 3.5 knots up, or I'm climbing at a few hundred feet a minute in that. So as you fly around, there's an instrument known as a variometer that displays that value. Now, of course, knots in a speed sense are shown on your airspeed indicator. And there's a device on the front of that of your airplane that's called a pitot tube. And the pitot tube has air going into it, and that reflects on the airspeed indicator. Any pilots in the room? Okay, I just want to know how much I can embellish this, right? Airplanes have a contest number, and so when you're in the air, when you make a radio call, you use your contest number to identify yourself. Mine is 2D or 2 Delta, and so as you see pictures in here, you'll see numbers on the tail of the airplane, and that's what it's referring to. Tasks are predetermined courses that are laid out. When you have a contest, the tasks are called by a guy who looks at the weather, and he knows the local area, and he'll design a task, and he'll assign the task. So when you have a contest, you can have a lot of airplanes. I've been to contests where you'd have 60 airplanes, and every one of those airplanes will be airborne within an hour. They have a guy that goes up first. He's called the sniffer. He goes up and makes sure there's enough lift up there to stay up, and then they start launching airplanes. You'll have, for 60, you'll have like 5 tow planes, and these guys are whipping them up fast. And once everybody's up in the air, the guy who's managing the contest says go, and not that you all race together, but you can start at that point. And you can wait 10, 15 minutes and start, but you'll fly a course, and the course is, there's a tow plane. The course is going to look like this. You've got these blue circles. That defines the course. So you're given a task sheet like this, and you go to your computer and you load it in, and you fly this course, and then your score is handicapped and you're ranked. And at the end of the week, they try to fly every day for a week. You have to fly, I think, a minimum of 3 or 4 days to complete the contest. So anyway, you fly contests. But this is I talked about the international website. This is what you look at. You can click on a guy's file and you can see where he went. And this guy right here did a triangular flight wherever he was. He was overseas somewhere. Anyway, so there's different kinds of flying. There's thermal flying, which we'll talk about first. Thermals are what we use here in our area. The sun heats the ground, and a little bit of wind is good, and it starts a rotation, and this thermal, which is a circular rising force of air, goes up. And if you've seen a dust devil, that's a visual thermal, essentially. I mean, when guys are out plowing the fields, prepping for planting, there's a little bit of wind and the temperature's just right, you'll see these things. And I know most of us in the room have seen these. So you would use a thermal to go cross country by climbing. You'll cruise through any neutral or sinking air, find another thermal and keep climbing. And in this area, I get away like 50 miles from the airport and come back. Our area is not necessarily all that great. And here's my flight computer. I was down over Brinkley on that day at 9,000 feet, and it showed I had an extra 2,800 feet to go just straight line to Cherry Valley at our airport. So those GPS units are phenomenal. In the old days, we all did the math in our head. We had a map in our lap. We had a rough idea how far we were, and you just crank some numbers. It became natural after a while. But the GPS units are great. This is out in New Mexico, where I like to go, just east of Albuquerque, and that's the tow plane out in front. So that's what it looks like when you're on tow. And it's just, if you are an outdoors person at all, whether you play golf, hunt, hike, whatever, we love the outdoors. You just love the beauty of it. And that's what I mean by the passion of it all for me, is the visuals are just stunning. I mean, the things that you can see. Now here is my it's a little fuzzy, but the upper left instrument, the one that's mostly in the center, it's pegged like this. That's the strength of that thermal. It's over 10 knots. I'm climbing at over 1,000 feet a minute in this thermal out in New Mexico. They've got a lot of sand and rock in the soil, so overnight that stuff will cool down, and then about lunchtime, the sun's been on it long enough, it just can't hold the heat anymore, and it just starts to release it, and the thermals are so strong that it's just amazing. And oh, by the way, the instrument in the above the left, the yellow handle there, that's an altimeter. And an altimeter is what records your altitude. And at this point, I'm at 15,000 plus feet. But an altimeter is what we reference our altitude by. And there could be pop-up rain showers you have to navigate around, which has got sink. There's no lift around those showers, so you have to kind of dance around those. And you learn all this as you fly. So this is a pre-launch grid for takeoff out there. Those AF gliders are from our Air Force Academy over in Colorado Springs. They teach guys primary flying in gliders and then launch them into other airplanes. And so these are great young men and women that come out there and fly at times as well. So the next kind of flying lift that we use is called ridge soaring, and it's basically a landmass that the air hits and it deflects it up. And as it deflects it up, you can ride in that ridge of air that's going up. And I like to go to the Chattanooga area. It's the closest place I can go. And here's a task that well, this is not the one I flew. This is for the silver distance. But you can plot your course, and we all get our gliders out and get them all. This is off of an airport over in that Chattanooga area. And they roll you up there. The two guys in this little glider in the front, there's two guys sitting in that glider. You get ready, and they push you out and hook you up because they're getting you out of there as fast as they can so everybody can get up and get going. So there's a glider on tow taking off. Just a brilliantly bright day that day, just beautiful. The scenery it had snowed overnight one morning when I was over there, and it's the visuals are just great. Can't get enough of that. This is hard to see, but in the middle of the picture there's a ramp there. This is a hang glider operation. These guys get out there and they strap their wings on, and they literally jump off of a cliff and catch that wind and then go flying, and then they come back and land on that ramp. So a lot of flying going on in this area over here. That's a gravel operation that gives off heat just like the ground over in New Mexico does. And just beautiful. Just beautiful over in that area. This is a navigation station that's about 70 miles north of where I took off. I got up there and took a picture of that. And there's my nav unit. On that day I did over a 5-hour flight, 5 hours and 15 minutes I was still in the air at that point. And you can see it says Sequatchie. I'm a negative 4,085 feet from getting back to where I took off. But I was in ridge lift. I mean, there was no danger there because I was in solid, reliable lift. They have motor gliders that can launch themselves. Here's a couple examples. Here's one, the propeller pops up out of the fuselage that's behind the pilot, and they fire that thing up and take off. Press a button, it stows back into the fuselage, and that's it. So the next kind of lift is referred to as mountain wave. And mountain wave is a meteorological phenomenon that is, when it's happening, it's very reliable, but it's hard to predict in a way. But you've got a landmass, which is in the lower left corner of the slide, and then you need a sufficient wind to hit it, and it goes up, and there are other temperature issues at altitude. But when it works, those uprising currents can go up into the 30,000 plus range, especially out in the big mountains that are out in the western U.S., overseas in Switzerland, places like that. There are places that people go to great lengths to drive to fly. But we've got a place in Asheville, North Carolina that's got a 6,300-foot landmass that comes down off that mountain chain. And we fly off this airport called Shiflett Field. It's a grass runway. And they give us a window of airspace. Atlanta air traffic controllers, we worked out this arrangement to have this. This is about a 13 by 19 mile chunk of airspace that goes up, and when we go flying, we can go into that airspace, and they keep airplanes out of it, because just to the east of there, you've got Charlotte, North Carolina, and these are airways that are up there, and there's jet traffic above 18,000. So below 18,000, there's not as much traffic, but these are jet airways. The orange ones are arrival routes into the airport over there at Charlotte. And so as long as you stay in that wave window, you're staying clear of traffic. This woman right here and her husband, they run a glider club northeast of it's a commercial operation, northeast of Chattanooga. And they bring their tow plane over and do this in the wintertime because that's one way for them to make money. She is a world-class glider pilot, has won contests around the world, and she and her husband run it's a commercial operation. On this particular date, it snowed overnight, but the ground was firm enough that we went ahead and flew anyway. We tie out at night. I got a little frost. I had to wait for that to melt off. That's me getting things ready. It gets cold up there. I got to 24,000 one time when I went, and there's no heater in these things. It gets pretty cold, but it is a blast. And like I said, it's a social and a flying experience that is just phenomenal. I love it. You know, the visuals are just stunning, as you can see. That's me flying out behind Sarah in the tow plane to get to that lift. Blue Ridge Parkway runs right across the area we fly over. It's just gorgeous. That's Mount Mitchell. That is the mountain that creates the wave that the wind. I got down and flew it as a ridge that day. I got down and just flew in the wind that was deflecting off of it. You know, maybe 50 feet over the trees, so to speak. I mean, it's interesting. You'll see people that'll look up and see you and wave at you occasionally. It's kind of funny. So anyway, there I was in the wave on this particular day. Again, the variometer that says knots, the word knots right there, is pegged. I'm climbing at well over 1,000 feet a minute because the lift was that strong. And then the altimeter that's just below it is showing my altitude. And on this particular lower right-hand screen of that, you can't read it, I don't think, from there, but I was at 23,687 feet at that point. I think when I hit 24, I was so stunned I couldn't get my camera out. I was like, you know, so I got to take a picture of this, you know, and so I struggled to get a picture of 24, but I got 23 plus, and that was pretty nice. And you wear oxygen up there, otherwise, you know, you don't last real long. You go on oxygen after you start coming through about 14,000. And that's the area looking back downwind. The airport is in the middle of that picture that I took off from. So anyway, our club has been in multiple locations over the years. That's hard to read, but we were once in the at Finley Field, which is over by Marion. We moved then over in the Memphis area. We've been in Forest City, and now we're at this place in Cherry Valley. Our club is called Memphis Soaring. There is a lot of information on there about what it costs to learn how to fly, how to get a demo flight. I've got my card here. If anybody wants to take one and contact me directly, we can arrange to meet you and make sure that when you come down, you get your flight. But I do have a couple of gift certificates here. Who can tell me what instrument the pitot tube sends to? Raise your hand and give me an answer. Speed? What's the instrument called? Airspeed indicator, of course. Yes. The other one is what instrument do we read to know how high we are? Variometer. Variometer? No. Altimeter. All right. The first one I heard is altimeter. Any questions? You guys are great.
Well, I have a question.
You go.
What can possibly go wrong, or give us one or two accounts of
Okay.
bad landing?
Okay.
Scary.
I am. You can land in a field. They land at a speed. My glider lands at about 30, a little over 30 knots. So you can land these things in a field, and I've done that multiple times. Or you can pick if you're fortunate enough to find a crop duster strip or an airport, the tow plane can come over and pull you out. But if you land in a field, you try to pick a field that your car and trailer can get into. Otherwise, you end up, and the stories are legend about guys landing in places where they have to carry the glider a quarter mile or more, to get it to their trailer. Which, 3 people can pick the fuselage up, and then another 2 people can carry the wings out. I mean, my entire glider assembled weighs 500 pounds. I mean, so the components are not too heavy to carry. And but when you ridge and wave soar, you're generally doing that around mountainous, hilly, treed terrain. And so you can't land in trees and mountains. And so ridge soaring is done generally where there's a valley where you can land in the valley. So if you, for some reason, get caught, the ground slopes away from you, so you can fly that slope down and land in a field at the base of the. So there are plenty of places around the world where there's probably fabulous ridge flying conditions, but there's no place to land out. Absolutely no place. So you don't. I mean, I have flown over areas going, man, that looks beautiful, but you'd never be able to get there and fly it safely. But some of these motor gliders, guys do drift into areas where if they have a problem, they can light their motor up, which sometimes it takes longer than they have, So they have to play that. Any other questions?
So how does this compare with motor flight in terms of licensing, use of airspace?
Good. You can solo at 14, licensed, meaning you can carry passengers at 16, and you need a way to get it airborne, and you can't do that. That's always the challenge. Motor gliders are really making a strong presence because they put electric motors on these things. The maintenance of an engine can be a challenge for a lot of people, even though it's a fairly simple engine. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And so we've got guys that have motor gliders that they don't want to. For example, one of our guys is a doctor from Dyersburg, Tennessee, and he'll come over and take a tow off of our airplane, but he's got this little electric motor. He could launch with it, but he doesn't burn his battery power launching with it. And when he gets up, if he runs out of lift, he just fires the motor up and flies around until he finds lift. But it's a little propeller that it comes off the nose of the airplane. He pushes a button and it starts running. It's just So the technology, as in many things in our society, have really caught up with the soaring thing. Motor gliders are the next big thing because you don't have to wait on a tow plane, and it's a safety issue too. So, any other questions? Yes, sir.
I guess what would be called a decision height, where you get to a point where I'm out of lift and I'm going to have to park this thing somewhere.
Yeah. You're just like when you fly a single engine airplane, a real regular motorized airplane. If you're trained properly and you're thinking properly, you're always considering the possibility of an engine failure in a single engine airplane. So you're kind of casually always checking around, say, if I had to, because you have a general idea. If you're flying in a single engine Cessna, for example, you're maybe at 6,000 or 8,000 feet. You know roughly how far you can glide, and so you're constantly kind of keeping your options in mind. It's not a pressure deal necessarily. It's something you think about. Well, the same thing happens in flying a glider. You have a knowledge of the conditions, and the conditions for us is that there's generally what's known as a lift band, which is that if you're below that altitude, the lift gets significantly weaker. So as you're flying around and you're getting to the bottom of the lift band, you stop and find altitude to go up, before you start to cruise. But to your point, when you get down to a certain altitude, you're below the lift band at that point, and you start thinking, this may not work out. I mean, I've had that happen several times. I mean, I was in New Mexico, and I was 35 miles from the airport, and I got down to 1,000 feet, that's where you ought to be coming into land. And I had picked a field out. There was a field next to an interstate interchange that if I landed, I could, if I couldn't get anybody on my phone or my handheld radio, I could go in, and there's a truck stop over there. So you start looking at all these options, but you're right that when you get to a certain altitude, you better be making plans to land, because it's going to happen whether you want it to or not. Yes, sir.
If you're in a really strong thermal updraft where it's solid, is it ever hard to actually come down?
Yeah, that's a funny comment, but it's true that the top of the thermal is generally at the base of a big cumulus cloud, and that's not exactly what you're saying, but you've got to be careful not to get sucked up into the cloud. My airplane actually has it's a wing leveler. It's a device that allows me to fly. If I get into a visual where I can't see, I can fly by reference to that and descend where I can see. So, but there are times when you say, okay, I'm done, I'm going to come in, and you start heading for home, and you're like, I can't even get this thing to come down. And we've got devices that we deploy that come up on top of the wing. They're called spoilers, which technically spoil the lift of the wing. It kills the wing's lifting function, or diminishes it a lot. And you pull this out, and these big old board type things come up, and now you can come down, because there are days that you could just fly around effortlessly all day. The lift is that good. So yeah, at times you have to take other measures to come down. It's kind of weird, but no engine, and yet it doesn't want to come down. So.
Do you have problems with any kind of drones or anything?
Nope, we don't have drone problems in our area, but I imagine some clubs do. I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate you
You're
coming
welcome.
in. That's so